In this tutorial, we're going to concentrate again on the lead vocal and the chorus. And what we're going to do is further tidying up. To be honest, this is actually the most important stage of all prep work for vocals. We want to get rid of all sibilants from the vocals. So S's and F's and letters like that really do sound terrible, particularly when they're put through reverbs and compressors. So we want to attenuate those. We also want to bandpass our lead and chorus vocals. So we want to get rid of all the redundant frequencies, be it low energy or high energy. We don't need them. We also want to get rid of the kind of transients, peak transients that trip compressors. And you often find that happens a lot in the low end of your mixes where you've got wideband, high amplitude frequencies that trip limiters, compressors, etc. And finally, we want to then drag the peak transients down towards the body of the audio so we've got this more consistent level running through the audio. One of the things that we have already done, which was a huge help, was to separate the lead from the chorus, which was all residing together in a single sung vocal line. And by doing that, we now have consistent levels for the lead and consistent levels for the chorus. Had I left the two together, we would have had a huge rise in volume when we got to the chorus. But by separating them means we can process each one separately without worrying about having to get our gains sorted out prior to any de-essing. A question that I'm often asked is, what is the order of processes when it comes to lead vocals? Do you de-ess first and then compress and EQ? Or do you de-ess, EQ, compress? Do you EQ, de-ess, compress? Do you compress, EQ, de-ess? It can get very, very confusing. But if you want to tackle those problems at source, then it's best to take things one step at a time. If you recall, in the last corrective video, we removed all the clicks using Isotope's declicker, and we used the gate to get rid of background noise, etc. In this tutorial, we're going to concentrate on de-essing, and then after we've de-essed, we're going to look at bandpass equalization, and it's going to be compensatory equalization. In other words, we're cleaning the channel and not coloring it. So that's the process to remove redundant frequencies, etc. And then we're going to compress. Let's decide first and foremost, do we want the de-esser to follow the EQ? Now let me show you what happens if we do EQ first. Let me start from a fresh slate. One of the things that I often do when I'm de-essing, depending on the sibilance itself, is to actually put in a shelf and boost about 4K upwards. Now I do this to boost the sibilant section of the sung vocals. And I do this so that the de-esser has less work to do afterwards. Because de-essers often suck the life out of high frequency mixes and audio that have a lot of presence factors. You'll find that de-essers will remove them. It's just the very nature of trying to attenuate sibilance. So sometimes I will boost, and this is a compensatory process, and it's sometimes a process that I use with other colored processing as well, whereby I will boost the specific frequency and then attenuate it. Quite often you'll see producers do things like this, whereby they boost specific frequencies, perform corrective processing, and then bring a really sweet equalizer in at the end to bring back those frequencies that have been attenuated by the corrective processes. For this particular tutorial, we don't need the EQ before the de-esser, because if you have a listen to this vocal line, you can hear the sibilants very, very clearly.
I wonder how much longer you're planning on dragging this out.
So that's made our life a lot easier. Separating the lead from the chorus was the best thing we did for this vocal line. So I'm going to now show you how we de-ess. Whether you want to equalize before de-ess, as I said, is up to you and very much dependent on the frequency content and what is actually happening in the audio that you want to process. So try it with an EQ pre-de-essing and try it with an EQ after de-essing. I always EQ after de-essing simply because I know the de-essing process is going to attenuate mid to high frequencies, so I'll need to enrich those again. Okay, I'm going to use 3 different de-essers here to show you how easy it is to use any of them. De-essing is not a complicated thing to do. So let's start with Cubase's built-in de-esser. And all I've done here is to select the frequency range and then to process it.
I'm getting anxious.
If you solo that band, you can hear what's in that band and whether the sibilance lies there or further down or higher up. Maybe you want to move the whole band across the spectrum. You can also use the difference to determine whether the de-essing has really worked. Threshold you can set or leave it on auto. And how much you want to attenuate it by is governed by this control. My recommendation is start off gentle and then move it further up if you want more extreme de-essing. Release, again, that's program dependent, so use your ears on that. But if you've got a short enough release, it should grab all the sibilance. If not, extend it a little. Don't have it too far because you want it to be able to grab each one of those sibilants and process it. So quite easy to do with the de-esser here.
I'm getting anxious, I'm about to shout. I'm tired, so tired of waiting. Why you gotta take it so slow?
Perfect. Now that's using Cubase's de-esser. We can use FabFilter's de-esser, which is even better. And again, if you need to copy the settings, go ahead. Let me show you how this works.
I wanna go, I'm so ready to go.
You can see the amount of de-essing taking place here. So let me audition, like we did using the solo feature on the Cubase de-esser, the frequency range that I've selected here, which is 4.7 to 12. And now you can clearly hear the sibilance, which is soloed. The range determines by how much we want the de-essing to be processed. So think of it as a de-essing amount. That would be too aggressive.
Ages ago.
See, we've actually lost the S's and the F's from there. So we need to bring this back a little.
How much longer you're planning on dragging this?
I'm just running through this quite fast because de-essers are actually very simple to use. You just need to select the bandwidth of the troublesome area and attenuate using the de-esser process itself. Finally, a very quick and easy plugin to use. It's called Sibilia. It's made by Hornet. And what I like about this, it works on fixed frequencies. You can highlight all the frequencies or any of the frequencies that you would like processed. So in effect, you could actually disable them and bring them in one by one and see if the amount actually has an effect on that band that you've selected. I just leave it at all of them and let it auto-detect itself. And it does a pretty good job.
I'm getting anxious.
That's how much attenuation you're getting across specific frequency bands there.
Tired, so tired of waiting. Why you gotta take?
To be honest, it's not rocket science. These fixed frequencies are pretty much the standard range of frequencies that you'll get sibilance in. If you noticed on the de-esser from Cubase, I dropped even lower to 1.5 kilohertz because I could hear some F's in there that sounded quite strong. So we needed to process those. Like I said, doesn't matter which one you use, they all do the same thing. I'm going to stick with the FabFilter one because I think it's the best by a mile.
Get so slow. I wanna go, I'm so ready to go. Got here.
Remember, we don't want to remove all sibilance because that forms part of the presence and the wispiness of particularly female vocals. And again, you want to attenuate them just enough that they become colourful, but not too much in your face and not too quiet. It really is an ear thing. Okay, next thing, I have an equalizer in place and determine the frequency range the vocals sit in. Okay, so we know there's very little happening below 80 to 100. Pick a low cut. You could brick wall this if you want, but I think a 24 dB is a good one to start with. Then solo and sweep. By soloing, we're only listening to what's happening with that particular band. Now, the way I do this is I solo at the start and listen. If I hear nothing, those are redundant frequencies. We don't need them. So we can move the high pass or the low cut further up the spectrum. So play it and sweep. I'm starting to hear her vocals just there at about 100 hertz. So I'll leave that one there. Now the next thing we need to do is to remove boxiness and that closed color that you get, particularly with these vocals. They're very boxy. So the trick here is to create a note, boost it, change the Q to about 3, and really boost it, sort of 6-7 dBs, and then solo. And then sweep. When you get to the bit where it sounds nasally or boxy, just grab the gain. You don't need to move anything else, and put it to negative values. That then becomes a cut. So let's try it. Yeah, that sounds pretty nasty.
Got here like ages ago.
So now we can cut this.
I wonder how much longer.
It's already tidied the vocals up.
Planning on dragging this out. I'm getting anxious. I'm about to shout.
Sounds a lot better. Now there's another resonant bit I'm hearing just above 300 that I think we need to tame. So let's now play this, and I'm really going to boost this.
Tired, so tired of waiting. Why you gotta take it
so that boxiness is around 500.
Wanna go, I'm so ready to go.
It's tough because we've got quite a range there.
Just so I wonder longer.
Perfect. Now let's attenuate it.
This out. I'm getting anxious. I'm about to shout. Tired, so tired of waiting. Why you gotta take it so slow?
Sounds great. Finally, and I'd like you to have a quick listen to this, and I'm going to put in a high cut there just so that you can experience what's happening when I go into solo mode here. There's nothing there. At 12.5K, there's nothing. At 10K, there's nothing. I can't hear a thing. 7K, very little. I need to get to around 3, 4, 5, 6 before I start hearing those frequencies. Now just there at about 5K, I like that sort of the wispiness there. So we now need to change this, and I'm going to change this to a shelf. And we're going to boost ever so slightly, only about 3 dB. So now we're going to have a little bit of air back into the audio line here, but we need to be careful here. We don't want it to be too bright.
I want to go, I'm so ready to ago. Just so I wonder how much longer.
So it's changed quite dramatically, the vocals here. They sound a lot better.
I'm getting anxious.
So corrective wise, we've got rid of all this nasty stuff, and we've boosted some of the air band. Really, I've boosted where I think the presence is in her vocals, just by a few dBs, because I'm now going to push all of this into a wonderful compressor. And the one I like to use the most is a FET compressor, because FETs are not only bright, but they're very fast, so it'll grab all the transients really fast. I'm going to show you what happens and why we want to grab some of those transients, because we want to smooth things off and make the dynamics a little bit closer to each other. So I want to bring quiet closer to loud. I don't want it brutal, so I don't want to work in RMS. I just want to work in peak mode, but just to shave a little off those peaks without it sounding as if I've compromised it. So have a listen to it with the compressor in place.
I wonder.
You can see how much movement we've got. There's no more than 2.5, 3 dBs max.
I'm getting anxious. I'm about to shout.
So the attack I've gone midway I didn't want too slow an attack or too fast an attack. Midway is just right in allowing some peak transients to come through. The release, again, you've got to use this to taste. If I extend the release, we start losing something from it. If I bring the release too short, it starts to get a little bit choppy in volume, which isn't what we really want. So play around with these two. These are the two most important knobs on a FET presser. A FET compressor like the 1176 doesn't even have a threshold. It behaves on drive input against output and by fixed ratio amounts, or the old mode where all the ratios are used at the same time. All I'm doing for now is just a gentle 4:1. I've left the internal sidechaining to 100. There's very little in a vocal that drops below that, but I'm making sure that nothing up to 100 Hertz is going to trip this compressor. So have a quick listen. Again, makeup gain is almost negligible here, 1.8 dB.
Why you gotta take it so slow? I wanna go, I'm so ready to go.
So a bit too pronounced and too...
Just so I wonder how much longer.
Too much there. So, like I said, use the attack and release to taste.
I'm getting anxious.
Till you've got this nice little jumping effect happening. Now, you might find that you want less of that.
Why you gotta take it so slow?
Change your threshold. For now, we're getting about a 1 to 2 dB of gain reduction. But we're grabbing all the peak transients here.
Just so I wonder how much longer you're planning on dragging.
Now, if I bypass this, you'll hardly hear any difference.
I'm about to shout. Tired, so tired of waiting.
But if you listen to the presence aspect of this vocal line, even the sibilant part that we've tamed and then boosted with the EQ, i.e. we've compensated for what we removed, sounds so much cleaner and more sort of intimate. These vocals actually sound quite good.
Why you gotta take it so slow?
So slow. Sounds really intimate instead of that sort of snaky effect. Finally, and this is purely up to you whether you want to do this or not, I like to use the TubeTech ME1B, which I think is the best equalizer for mid-range bar none. And really all I'm doing is shaving a little off here in the mid-range at about 700, whilst I'm also boosting at 700. And I'm also boosting the airband again a little bit here. But I found that this might have been one step too far, as we've already got an EQ and a very bright compressor. But have a listen.
I wanna go, I'm so ready to go. Got here like ages.
It's extremely subtle.
Just so I wonder.
But it gives it that nice sort of silky smoothness. This really is a wonderful equalizer. This section, the ME1B, is purely for mid-range. I'm only using it really to tame, blend, and push a little. I'm not doing anything massive on this. That's not what it's about. It's just about affording it a nice silky smoothness. Now, I'm very happy with this result. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. And I'm going to call it Let's Go Tamed. Now, when we go to the chorus,
Let's go.
We can drag in the same chain of effects and have a listen there, and if it sounds good, we'll leave it as it is.
Let's go. My heart is about to blow. I'm waiting for you. Let's go.
Oh, it's much, much better. You can hear all that sort of noisy low mids to mids have all gone, disappeared. The S's have been tamed nicely and then boosted back up to sound more presence as opposed to sibilance, and I think that TubeTech's done wonders, particularly on this, because it's louder, so it's taming it and giving it that kind of gluey smoothness that really wasn't that apparent on the lead vocal using the ME1B. I think it sounds great on both, so I'm going to leave it in.
I'm ready for the show. I'm ready for you. Let's go.
Now listen to it without.
I'm ready for ready for the show. I'm ready for you. Let's go, let's go.
It's a huge difference. Okay, we're going to leave it at that for now. I'm not going to render these in place simply because I've got a compressor and an equalizer that might need changing, altering ever so slightly so that the effects sound nice and consolidated. But as far as the de-essing and the compensatory EQ goes, we could render it with those in place. But as I said, it's up to you. If it's not straining your CPU, you might as well leave them in there in the event that we want to do any fine editing.